Hey there, everyone. Good evening to you. Let's talk about emotions for a moment. I've made videos about this before, but I think that it's an important subject to tackle. And whenever I do, before I start the video, I kind of ponder it and think, that's a little cheesy. People already know these things, or nobody wants to hear it from me. But here I am anyway, talking about emotional intelligence, which is something that I've been working on in my own life, throughout my life. Obviously, we start out as little spoiled brats when we're kids, and regardless of how good of a child you were, we have to be taught right from wrong in one way or another. At least what is viewed as right and wrong by our parents, which that'll be for another time altogether. A different subject I'd like to tackle. However, as we're raised, we learn many tools that help us to navigate the world emotionally. But we also acquire many hindrances and a lot of baggage that causes us to panic in the face of adversity or fear or get frustrated when little things happen. So I'm just going to go over some of the basic emotional states and explain where I'm coming from, and ending on perhaps anger. Or perhaps I'll start with anger. Somebody actually mentioned in a video I made the other day, I recall a comment about anger not being a useful emotion. And I understand where the person was coming from. However, it's not necessarily the fact that anger is useful. It can be useful, though. For example, anger in its own right is more or less useless, but anger in a threatened situation can cause you to act in a way that could save your life. For example, adrenaline comes when you're angry or when you're scared, but often it's hard to know the difference. If you're being threatened, getting angry can help you survive. But let me just talk about anger for a moment as an emotion that can be controlled. The idea, and what I've learned, is not to get angry and just hang on to emotion. That's obviously unhealthy. And it's also unhealthy to pretend like you're all smiles. When somebody is spitting in your face, when somebody's calling you names, berating you, insulting you, it's okay to get a little angry. And it's okay to strike back. Not physically necessarily, but to say what you mean. You should always tell people how you feel. Sometimes it's not worth it. We have to decide, and that's another intelligence that we have to learn on our own. However, responding in anger to stubbing your toe, for example, there have been studies that have shown that actually a curse word, when you hurt yourself, actually helps release endorphins, which can help the pain, which is naturally stab your toe and whack, that's just, and it's over, right? You can do the same thing when people piss you off. You can just get frustrated for a second and let it go. You learn to let things flow through you. The same thing happens, move on to sadness here. Sadness is something that some people hang on to as a crutch. It can manifest itself as depression. But if you let it get a hold of you, often we can continue to create our own depression and anxiety that goes along with it. Anxiety and depression being two different things, I've experienced them both, and I'm well aware that they have many different levels, and dealing with depression is very unique for most individuals, but let's just say a general sadness. A lot of men are told not to cry. Not told not to cry, but there's this general consensus, especially with older generations. This has changed now, obviously. We went through a phase where kids were told you should cry and men should cry, or, you've got no heart if you don't cry. And I think we've come to terms with the realization that women are slightly more sensitive emotionally than men overall. But there's nothing wrong with a man crying, and I think that it's very healthy. Sometimes I can cry in the morning just watching a sad show, or even an ad or about something, it's good to get that emotion out. So anger and sadness. Happiness is something that many people strive for. Everyone strives for. But what I mean is a continual state of happiness and elation. This leads people to take pharmaceuticals. They want to combat their anxiety and their depression and their sadness and just be happy all the time. So you'll take an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Maybe people are taking Prozac or Zoloft or some other medication that helps them to feel good for a while, but in the meantime it's adjusting and rewiring your brain and your synapses and how much serotonin your body can your brain can naturally produce, and you end up dependent upon the substance. And there are plenty of nightmare stories of people trying to quit using those pharmaceuticals. So I wanted to throw that in there. It's not a solution long term. If a person has a severe depression, that's a different story. And I've taken benzos for anxiety short term. But long term, I don't think it's a very healthy way to deal with our emotions, because you can't just combat sadness. You can't just combat anxiety. You get rid of them all, and people become what they call the zombie nation. It's a zombie syndrome out there, and a lot of people know what I'm talking about. People walking around without any real sense of emotion, it doesn't allow us to properly respond to our environment. Just simple fact. So, but being happy is an important part of our life, but we know it's not going to last. And so I think an emotional intelligence is learning how to be happy when we're happy, and when we have an up or a down, we just kind of take it as it comes. And there are many other subtler emotions, you know. There's confusion, which can manifest itself into anxiety. Everyone's had confusion in their life, and sometimes it gets to the point where we're overwhelmed about things. And I think being overwhelmed and being confused can be very similar, and one can lead to another. It's the feeling like when you're too cluttered and then you clean up your house and all of a sudden it feels that much better. Well, you can do the same thing to your brain, and it takes years to declutter those thoughts that hold us back. So whenever you have a negative thought, analyze it, think about it. Then ask yourself, is it even a negative thought? Don't try to hide from how you truly feel. For example, if you feel deep down inside you were wronged by someone, and you're telling yourself to just let it go, just let it go. Sometimes you can't let it go. You have to tell the person how you feel. You know, this is a well-known, aspect of, it's kind of like forgiving those you were wronged in AA with the 12 steps, There's always this, making amends with people. But that also, there's another side of that, which is forcing people to make amends with you, or at least telling them how you feel. You don't have to get an apology. But my point on that is there are certain things that nag us. Even though we're trying to be emotionally smart, there's certain things that nag us. For example, eliminating anxiety. That's great. I've gotten rid of most of my anxiety, but there's a little part of it. I need to do my taxes. I need to do this. I need to, pay these bills and finish fixing my teeth, and they do bug me, and I can't completely abandon that, and I shouldn't, because that stress is helpful for me to live my life. You see what I mean? There's a healthy amount of stress that we have, that we shouldn't want to combat that. And sadness. That's another part that I have to have. It's an empathy for other people. God, there's so many people out there who don't seem to care about anyone but themselves. And I think that that's a protective measure we take to kind of escape our responsibility to one another. We say, well, I'm going to take care of myself and my family and screw everyone else. But we know deep down inside that never works for us. So also control your jolly nature, your happiness. And be authentic. Be a true person. Share the you that you want the world to see. And it may not always be perfect. Damn well won't be. But at least we can say we tried, we did our best, and we learned to deal with this life as it comes. A few substances here and there might help us along the way. Don't write it off completely, but we still have to live life on life's terms overall. Got no choice. Be well, my friends. Talk to you next time.